Ancient deities hold secrets that defy our modern understanding. We are about to journey across forgotten worlds to uncover 25 of the most enigmatic divine stories ever told. These are not the familiar tales of Zeus or Odin, but deeper mysteries from lost cultures, stories that challenge everything we think we know about gods and humanity. By the end of this exploration, you will possess a new perspective on the divine, seeing ancient myths as complex puzzles waiting to be solved. We will investigate a Mayan god who vanished from history without a trace and a Mesopotamian demon king worshipped as a protector. What part of the ancient world most captivates your imagination? Deep within the humid jungles of the Maya world, a god of immense power simply ceased to be. This is the enigma of Kayawil. He was not a minor spirit but a deity of fundamental forces, a being of lightning that cracked the sky, of serpents that symbolized the earth's fertility, and of life-giving sustenance itself. His image is unforgettable, a figure often shown with one leg transforming into a serpent and a smoking torch, or sometimes a stone blade erupting directly from his forehead. This torch was not merely a decoration, it was a symbol of his fiery, creative power, the very spark of life and royal authority. For centuries, kings sought his blessing, and his visage was carved into stone and painted in sacred books. Then he was gone. Across the great city-states, the creation of new images of Kayawil stops. It is as if a switch was flipped, and a fundamental piece of the Maya cosmic order was erased from public view. So what could cause a civilization to turn its back on such a vital god? One theory points to a profound theological shift. Perhaps the Maya understanding of the universe evolved, and the specific powers Kayawil represented were absorbed by other, more dominant deities in their pantheon. His role was made obsolete by a changing worldview. Another, more dramatic possibility is a top-down political purge. The worship of Kayawil was deeply tied to royal lineage and power. A new dynasty rising to power might have sought to break from the past, systematically dismantling the cult of a god so closely associated with their predecessors. By erasing Kayawil, they could rewrite divine history to solidify their own rule. The most haunting theory, however, suggests his disappearance mirrors a real cataclysmic event. Could a terrible drought, a prolonged famine, or a devastating defeat in war have been interpreted as Kayawil abandoning his people? If the god of sustenance and lightning failed to bring rain and food, his worship might have been deemed ineffective and deliberately terminated. The archaeological record offers little comfort. It is defined by an absence, a silent gap where a god should be. This silence speaks volumes about the fragility of even the most powerful divine narratives. A story that shaped a culture for generations can, under the right pressures, vanish almost without a trace, leaving behind only a smoking torch in the empty space where a god once stood. But sometimes a deity is not erased, but instead endures through a terrifying paradox. Far from the Maya jungles, in the dust-choked winds of ancient Mesopotamia, we find Pazuzu, a figure whose very name evokes dread. Forget the cinematic demon. The real Pazuzu was far more complex. He was the king of the wind demons, a creature of unimaginable horror. His face was a grotesque mask, often depicted with a canine snarling muzzle, bulging eyes that saw all, and a scaly body crowned with the wings of a predator bird. His hands ended in claws, not human fingers, and he was the bringer of the scorching east wind, a force that carried disease, locusts, and famine. He was the embodiment of pestilence. And yet, people willingly brought his image into their homes. Why would anyone invite such a monster across their threshold? The answer lies in the very nature of the Mesopotamian spirit world, a realm teeming with dangers far worse than a single demon king. The greatest of these threats was Lamashtu, a malevolent goddess who preyed upon the most vulnerable. She stalked pregnant women, seeking to steal their unborn children, and she snatched infants from their mothers' arms. Against such a terrifying foe, who could you possibly call for protection? Only a power greater and more fearsome than Lamashtu herself. Pazuzu became that paradoxical shield. He was the enemy of his own kind, a demon used to ward off demons. His terrifying visage, carved into small stone heads or cast into bronze amulets, was not merely a decoration. It was a weapon. These artifacts were placed in homes, especially in rooms where women and children slept, serving as a spiritual warning sign. The message was clear to any malevolent spirit. This household is under the protection of the king of the wind demons. Trespass at your peril. But this leads us to a profound mystery. Were these Pazuzu heads protective talismans, or were they something more like spiritual prisons? Could it be that by fixing his likeness to an object and binding it with incantations, people were not just invoking his power but also attempting to control and contain it? They needed his strength to guard against Lamashtu, but they also feared the very wind he commanded. This duality is etched into the artifacts themselves. Incantation bowls buried at the corners of homes have been found inscribed with spells that call upon Pazuzu to block the approach of other demons. The words are a desperate bargain, an appeal to the lesser of two evils. The amulets often show him in a dominant pose, sometimes even holding a weapon, a symbol of his active role as a guardian. So was Pazuzu a revered protector or a captive force? The line is beautifully, terrifyingly blurred. He was a necessary terror, a contained storm, a reminder that in the ancient world, safety could sometimes only be found in the shadow of a monster. A different kind of power awaited in the searing heat of the Egyptian desert, one that could crown a mortal man a god. Far from the royal courts, deep within the impossibly remote Siwa oasis, stood the temple of Amun, home to the most influential oracle in the ancient world. This was not a place easily reached. The journey was a gauntlet of sun and sand, a weeks-long trek across the vast, waterless dunes of the Libyan desert. Many who sought its wisdom never arrived, their bones becoming just another part of the landscape. It was this very peril that made a consultation with the oracle a matter of supreme importance, an act that could only be justified by a question of world-altering significance. And so, in 331 BC, a young king named Alexander dared the impossible journey. He was already a brilliant military commander, but he needed something more than earthly authority to legitimize his conquest of Egypt and his grander ambitions. He needed a divine endorsement. After a harrowing trip where his army was reportedly saved by a freak rain shower and guided by talking snakes or ravens, depending on the legend, Alexander finally reached the lush, hidden paradise of Siwa. He entered the inner sanctum of the temple, a place forbidden to all but the high priest and the supplicant. What transpired inside remains one of history's great enigmas. The official proclamation, however, echoed across continents. The oracle of Amun himself confirmed that Alexander was not merely a king, but the son of the god Zeus Ammon, a fusion of the Greek and Egyptian supreme deities. This was not just a piece of flattering news, it was a political and theological earthquake. It granted Alexander the divine right to rule Egypt as a pharaoh, placing him above all other mortal leaders and unifying his multicultural army under a celestial banner. He was, from that moment forward, Alexander the Great, son of a god. But how did the oracle achieve such profound and transformative pronouncements? The methods of the Siwa priests are a mystery that still tantalizes scholars. One compelling theory suggests the temple was built over a natural geological fissure, one that seeped hypnotic or hallucinogenic gases. Could a priest breathing in these ancient vapors have entered a trance-like state, speaking with what was believed to be the voice of the god himself? Another possibility points to masterful psychological manipulation. The priests of Amun were renowned for their knowledge and intelligence. They would have known exactly who Alexander was and what he needed to hear. The entire ritual, from the brutal journey to the isolated, awe-inspiring setting, was designed to break down a person's rational defenses, making them supremely susceptible to a carefully crafted revelation. Was it divine inspiration, chemical alteration, or the ultimate application of human insight? The line is impossible to draw. This mystery has fueled a modern archaeological quest to find the oracle's exact spring, the very heart of its power. The ruins of the temple are visible, but the specific chamber, the source of the prophetic voice or vapor, remains elusive. Excavations continue, with scientists scanning the ground for hidden chambers and testing the air and rock for traces of intoxicating substances like ethylene or methane. Each shovelful of sand removed could bring us closer to understanding whether Alexander's divinity was bestowed by the earth itself, or by the brilliant, calculated theater of men who understood the human need to hear the gods speak. The oracle's greatest secret is not just what it said, but how it managed to say it with such undeniable, empire-building authority. The oracles of Egypt gave kings their divine right, but in the misty forests of ancient Europe, a god's power came from a different source entirely. Meet Cernunnos, the Horned One. His most famous portrait is etched onto the magnificent Gundestrup cauldron, a silver vessel of incredible craftsmanship. There he sits cross-legged in a pose that suggests deep meditation, a talk of nobility around his neck and holding a serpent in one hand, and from his head the antlers of a mighty stag branch out, a crown of the wild. He is the lord of the animals, depicted with creatures of all kinds at his side, from the familiar stag and boar to the exotic lion and dolphin. This image speaks of a profound connection to the natural world, a master of beasts and the untamed wilderness. Yet here lies the core of the enigma. We have his face, but we have lost his voice. No great Celtic epic survives to tell us his stories. No prayers inscribed in stone reveal what his worshippers asked of him. He is a god defined by a stunning silence, so what can his powerful iconography tell us? The antlers point to a cycle of death and rebirth, as stags shed and regrow their crowns each year. This suggests a god of fertility, of the endless turning of the seasons. The torque he holds and the one he wears symbolize wealth and status, perhaps linking him to the prosperity of the land itself. The serpent is a complex symbol, often connected to the underworld and regenerative power, hinting that Cernunnos may have been a guardian of the earth's deep secrets and the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. His cross-legged posture is deeply significant. It is not a pose of action but of stillness, reminiscent of a shaman deep in a trance. Could the Horned One have been a psychopomp, a guide for souls journeying between worlds? His dominion over nature might have extended into the spirit realm, facilitating a kind of shamanic travel that connected the everyday world to the other world. This shamanic interpretation offers a compelling thread that connects him to later folklore. Centuries after the Celtic world faded, the figure of Herne the Hunter appears in English legend, a spectral, antlered spirit who haunts Windsor Forest. Herne leads a wild hunt, a ghostly parade of souls through the stormy sky. Is Herne a faded, folkloric memory of the great god Cernunnos, his priestly functions forgotten, his image distilled into a ghost story? The possibility is tantalizing. This leads to the final, haunting question. Why was the narrative of such a prominent god so completely erased? The answer lies in the brutal machinery of the Roman conquest. The Romans had a policy of interpretatio romana, where they would equate foreign gods with their own. Sometimes this preserved a deity, but for a god as uniquely Celtic as Cernunnos, it may have had the opposite effect. His complex nature did not fit neatly into Roman boxes like Mercury or Apollo. More destructively, the Roman war against the Druids, the intellectual and spiritual leaders of Celtic society, was a campaign of cultural annihilation. The Druids were the keepers of the oral traditions, the living libraries of stories like those of Cernunnos. With their systematic suppression and eradication, the sacred narratives died with them. The images survived on metal and stone, but the stories told in the sacred groves, whispered in the firelight, were lost forever. we are left with a powerful portrait of a god in deep conversation with the natural world, a silent king whose stories we can only try to reconstruct from the echoes left in his wake. The silent forests of Cernunnos give way to the shimmering dawn, where a different kind of duality reigns. From the heart of the ancient Vedas come the Ashvins, twin gods of the morning light, physicians to the cosmos itself. They are the first light of sunrise, golden and youthful, eternally racing across the sky in a chariot drawn by horses or birds. Their stories are a tapestry of miraculous interventions, rescuing the shipwrecked, curing the blind and the lame, and even restoring youth to the aged. They are the embodiment of hope and healing, a divine 9-1-1 service for a world filled with perils. One famous hymn tells of a sage named Chayavana, who was so old and withered he was nearly mistaken for a log. The Ashvins restored his vitality, making him young and strong again, a testament to their life-giving power. Their benevolence was so profound that they were known as the lords of 1,000 remedies. Yet their very nature as divine twins points to a deeper, more ancient pattern, a story that echoes far beyond the Indian subcontinent. Centuries later and continents away, the Roman historian Tacitus recorded a brief, puzzling account of a Germanic people called the Nahavali. He wrote of a sacred grove where they worshipped a pair of brothers known as the Alces. These twins, he noted, were celebrated as young men and warriors, and their worship was conducted without any images or outward symbols. And with that scant description, the historical record for the Alces twins falls silent. They become ghosts, their true nature an enduring riddle. Were they, like the Ashvins, divine healers? Were they warrior gods protecting their tribe? Or did they represent something more chthonic, more connected to the dark earth and the underworld? The lack of imagery only deepens the mystery, suggesting a form of worship so abstract or so secret that it defied representation. This is where the puzzle snaps into focus. Both pairs of twins are believed to spring from a common source, a Proto-Indo-European archetype of divine brothers. These ancient twins were often associated with horses, the dawn, and a fundamental duality, one representing the celestial and the other the mortal or terrestrial realm. So why did the Ashvins blossom into such vividly detailed deities with a rich liturgical tradition, while the Alces faded into a single paragraph of historical footnote? The answer likely lies in the scribes. The Vedic traditions of India were preserved through an unbroken, rigorous oral tradition that was eventually committed to writing, meticulously safeguarding the stories of the Ashvins for millennia. In contrast, the Germanic tribes, including the Nahavali, primarily relied on oral histories. Their myths and sacred stories were living things, passed from generation to generation, vulnerable to the ravages of time, migration, and conquest. When these cultures were eventually absorbed or displaced, their unique pantheons often crumbled, leaving behind only the tantalizing glimpses recorded by outsiders like Tacitus. The Ashvins represent a tradition that was written down and survived, while the Alces represent the countless divine narratives that were simply lost, their stories whispered once and then carried away on the wind. While the Ashvins represent a tradition preserved, another ruler sought to erase an entire pantheon. The reign of the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten was a violent tremor that shook the foundations of one of the world's most stable civilizations. He was not merely a king, he was a revolutionary who attempted to dismantle a religion thousands of years old. Without warning, he abandoned the vast and complex world of Egyptian gods, from the powerful Amun to the protective Isis. In their place, he elevated a single, abstract deity, the Aten, represented simply as a sun disk whose rays ended in hands offering the Ankh, the symbol of life, to the royal family. This was a worship of light itself, a stark departure from the animal-headed, human-bodied gods that had defined Egypt for millennia. Was this the world's first experiment with monotheism? It is a compelling and haunting possibility. Akhenaten did not just preach a new theology, he enforced it with absolute power. He emptied the temples of the old gods, cut off the immense economic and political power of their priesthoods, and built an entirely new capital city from scratch, dedicated solely to the Aten. He called this city Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten, a place of open-air temples where the sun's rays could fall directly upon the altars. His true motivation remains one of history's great puzzles. Was he a genuine religious visionary, a man who saw a single, universal creative force in the universe? Or was this a brilliant, cynical political maneuver to break the priesthood of Ammon, which had grown so powerful it rivaled the throne itself? The evidence is carved in stone, and it is profoundly strange. The art from his period is unlike anything before or after in Egypt. Akhenaten is depicted with a startlingly androgynous appearance, an elongated head, a thin neck, a potbelly, and wide feminine hips. His wife, Nefertiti, is shown with a similar, though less exaggerated, physique. This radical shift in artistic convention is a mystery in itself. Was it a deliberate attempt to show the king as a conduit for both male and female creative energies, a living embodiment of the Aten's all-encompassing nature? Or do these depictions hint at an underlying medical condition, a genetic or hormonal disorder that physically altered his body? Scholars have debated for decades, proposing conditions like Marfan syndrome, but a definitive diagnosis from bones that have never been conclusively identified is impossible. The revolution, however, died with him. After Akhenaten's death, the old gods returned with a vengeance. His name was systematically chiseled off monuments. His city was abandoned to the desert sands. His son, the famous Tutankhamun, even changed his name from Tutankhaten to distance himself from his father's disgraced god. This was an official damnatio memoriae, a condemnation of memory, an attempt to erase him from history entirely. For centuries it worked. Akhenaten became the heretic king, a ghost in the Egyptian records. His story was only pieced back together through relentless archaeological detective work. The discovery of his lost city, Amarna, provided the clues, and the survival of a few inscriptions that the ancient censors missed allowed his voice to whisper across the ages. His enigma forces us to ask, was he a prophet ahead of his time, or a tyrant whose radical vision was too fragile to survive the weight of tradition? A single, stunning artifact captures the fierce heart of Mesopotamian divinity. Known as the Burni relief, this terracotta plaque depicts a woman of breathtaking and terrifying power. She is nude with wide, downward sweeping wings, and she stands firmly upon the backs of two lions. Her feet are clawed like those of a bird of prey, and she holds a rod and ring in each hand, the universal symbols of divine authority and justice in Mesopotamia. Flanking her are two owls, their wide, knowing eyes staring out from the frame. Every element of this image radiates strength, sovereignty, and a connection to the untamed world. Yet for all its clarity, the identity of this goddess is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in archaeology. The debate revolves around three formidable figures from the Mesopotamian pantheon. The primary candidate is Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love and war, who was later worshipped by the Akkadians as Ishtar. Inanna was a deity of profound contradictions, embodying both life-giving fertility and brutal, chaotic warfare. Her symbol was the lion, and she was frequently described as having the power to fly, making the winged form and the regal beasts a perfect fit. The rod and ring would signify her role as a divine ruler. Yet some scholars point to her darker counterpart, Ereshkigal, the queen of the great below. As the ruler of the underworld, Ereshkigal commanded demons and held power over death itself. The owls, often associated with the night and the unseen realms, could be her attendants, and her nakedness might symbolize the raw, stripped bare state of the dead. Then there is the third and most controversial candidate, the demoness Lilitu, who would later evolve into the figure of Lilith in Hebrew lore. Lilith was a winged spirit of the night who preyed upon pregnant women and infants, a succubus who defied male authority. The owls and the lions could represent her dominion over the dangerous nocturnal wilderness. So how do we solve a puzzle with no written name? The clues are in the symbols themselves, and they point in conflicting directions. The rod and ring are typically held by gods of the highest order, like the sky god Anu, which strongly supports the identification as Inanna or Ishtar, a queen of heaven. But if she is Inanna, why the prominent, haunting owls, creatures not typically central to her iconography? If she is Ereshkigal, why is she depicted outside of her underworld domain, bathed in what seems to be celestial power? And if she is Lilith, why would a feared demoness be shown holding the ultimate symbols of legitimate divine rule? The truth is, we may be imposing our own modern need for clear categories on an ancient mind that saw divinity as fluid and multifaceted. This goddess might represent a specific aspect of one of these deities that we no longer understand, a form of Inanna that governed the night, or an aspect of Ereshkigal that held sway over wild beasts. She could even be a composite figure, a powerful, unnamed mother or queen of demons whose specific cult has been entirely lost. The Burney relief is a powerful reminder that an image can survive for millennia while its name and story vanish. We are left with a portrait of magnificent, untamable power, a divine woman whose true name is a secret the ancient world has kept for itself. A severed head that speaks wisdom is one of the most haunting images from Norse mythology. This is the fate of Mimir, a being whose story begins not with his death, but with a fragile peace treaty. In the aftermath of the brutal war between the two tribes of gods, the Aesir and the Vanir, they agreed to a truce sealed by an exchange of hostages. It was a divine gesture of trust. The Vanir sent their finest, Kvasir, who was said to be the wisest being ever to live. In return, the Aesir sent Mimir, a god renowned for his unparalleled knowledge and foresight. But the truce shattered almost immediately. The Vanir came to believe they had been cheated, that Mimir, for all his wisdom, was not a fair trade. In a brutal act of retaliation, they beheaded him and sent his head back to the Aesir. It was a message written in blood, a declaration that their peace had failed. Yet this is not where Mimir's story ends. It is where it transforms into something far stranger. The god Odin, the All-Father himself, did not bury the grisly relic. He preserved Mimir's head through powerful magic, anointing it with special herbs and chanting spells over it to keep it from decay. He gave the head back its voice, and for ages after, he would carry it with him, consulting it in times of dire need. Mimir's severed head became Odin's most trusted counselor, a silent oracle that whispered secrets from beyond the grave. But where did this profound wisdom originate? The answer lies at a place of cosmic significance, Mimir's well. This was no ordinary spring. It was located at the base of Yggdrasil, the world tree, tangled among its very roots. This well was the source of Mimir's knowledge, a bubbling pool of primordial memory and cosmic insight. And after Mimir's death, it was his own preserved head that became the well's guardian. The most famous story of all involves Odin's desperate thirst for this knowledge. He journeyed to the well and asked for a single drink from its waters. Mimir's head, now the well's sentinel, agreed, but the price was not gold or a simple promise. The price was one of Odin's own eyes. Without hesitation, Odin plucked out his eye and cast it into the well's dark depths. In return, he was permitted to drink, and his sacrifice granted him a vision of the cosmos so vast it dwarfed his former understanding. So what was the true nature of this well? Was it a literal pool of water or something more metaphysical? The myths suggest it was a well of memory, a liquid library containing all that had ever happened and the hidden patterns of all that ever would. To drink from it was to tap into the consciousness of the universe itself. This raises a chilling question about the whispers Odin heard from Mimir's head. Were they the counsel of a conscious, thinking being, or was the head merely a conduit, a mouthpiece for the timeless knowledge flowing from the well? Odin was seeking the wisdom to prevent Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. What terrible secrets did the head reveal about that inevitable doom? Did it tell him his own fate or the futility of his struggle? The image of the one-eyed god listening to a severed head is a powerful metaphor for the cost of true wisdom. It tells us that profound knowledge is never free, that it requires the ultimate sacrifices, and that the greatest truths are often found in the most unsettling of places, spoken by the most unexpected of voices. The story of Mimir's well speaks of wisdom found in sacrifice, but another god's myth suggests our very bodies are born from a divine crime. The popular image of Dionysus, the joyful god of wine and ecstasy, is merely the surface of a far deeper and more terrifying mystery. Within the secretive Orphic cult, he was worshipped as Dionysus Zagreus, the horned child, a being whose tragic fate was woven into the fabric of humanity itself. According to these esoteric texts, Zeus had chosen this child, born from his union with the underworld queen Persephone, to be his true heir, the future ruler of the cosmos. He placed the infant Zagreus on his own throne and commanded all the world to pay him homage. But this divine favor sparked a jealous rage in the old gods, the Titans. Luring the young god away from his protectors, the Titans offered him toys, including a mirror. As Zagreus gazed at his own reflection, captivated by his image, the Titans seized their moment. They attacked, tearing the child apart and devouring every piece of his body. The cosmos itself seemed to shudder at the act, yet in the midst of this horror, a single part of the god remained untouched. The goddess Athena, witnessing the atrocity, managed to rescue the still beating heart of Dionysus Zagreus. She brought this sacred heart to Zeus, who, in his fury, obliterated the Titans with a thunderbolt so powerful it reduced them to ashes. But from that pile of ash, something new was created: humanity. The Orphics believed that the first humans were fashioned from the smoldering remains of the Titans, who had just consumed the body of the young god. This is the core of the Enigma, a shocking theological idea that set this mystery cult apart from all other Greek beliefs. It meant that every human being carried a dual nature within them. Our physical bodies, mortal and flawed, were born from the sinful Titans, but trapped within that titanic flesh was a tiny, divine spark, a fragment of the soul of Dionysus Zagreus. Our entire mortal existence, therefore, was a journey to purify that inner spark, to free the divine peace of the god from the prison of the body. This was the ultimate goal of the Orphic mysteries, a secret path to salvation through ritual purity and ascetic living. Why was this story so fiercely guarded, known only to initiates sworn to secrecy? Because it presented a radical challenge to the mainstream Greek worldview. It suggested that the gods were not just capricious beings on a distant mountain, but that a piece of the divine was actually trapped within us, and that our life was a struggle to reclaim our lost divinity. The dismemberment of the god was not just a brutal myth, it was a map of the human soul. The enigma persists because the cult's full practices died with its last initiates, leaving only fragments of poetry and cryptic references on gold tablets buried with the dead. We are left to wonder, were these rituals a reenactment of the god's death and rebirth, a symbolic journey to reassemble our own scattered divinity? The story of the horned child echoes through the ages, a haunting whisper that we are all, in a very real sense, the orphaned pieces of a forgotten god. A god's name can echo long after his temples have fallen. Across the vast plains and dense forests of ancient Slavic lands, the name Perun was spoken with a reverence reserved for the sky itself. He was the thunderer, the wielder of the stone axe, a divine warrior whose chariot wheels were the rumble of the storm and whose weapon was the lightning bolt. Like Thor or Zeus, he was the enforcer of cosmic order, the protector of warriors, and the master of the elements. Yet, when Christianity spread through the Slavic world, his worship was not merely suppressed, it was almost surgically erased. The rich tapestry of his myths, the epic poems and sacred stories, were torn down, leaving behind only a handful of frayed threads. the central mystery of Perun is not his power, but his profound absence, a ghostly outline of a kingdom we can no longer fully see. We are left to reconstruct his image from scattered clues. His name survives, stubbornly embedded in the landscape. Countless villages and hills across Eastern Europe bear names like Peranova Gora, Perun's mountain. In the folklore of remote villages, rituals persisted for centuries where farmers would strike the ground with axes during a drought, calling upon a forgotten lord of the rain. Oaths were sworn in his name long after the people had forgotten who he was, a testament to the deep, linguistic roots of his divinity. These fragments are like scattered pieces of a shattered mosaic, individually beautiful but failing to show the complete picture. We know he was associated with the oak tree, a universal symbol of strength and endurance, and that his sacred day was Thursday, just as Thor's was. But what were his great deeds? Who were his divine children? What was his relationship with the other gods in his pantheon, like Veles, the serpent god of the underworld who was his eternal adversary? These stories are lost. This erasure leads to one of the most tantalizing archaeological hunts in Eastern Europe, the search for a grand temple dedicated to Perun in the city of Kiev. Historical chronicles tell us that Prince Vladimir, before his dramatic conversion to Christianity in 988, erected a state-sanctioned pagan pantheon on a hill overlooking the city. At its center stood a wooden idol of Perun, described as having a silver head and a golden mustache. This was not a simple shrine. It was a statement of political and theological power, an attempt to unify the diverse Slavic tribes under a single supreme god. For a brief moment, Perun was elevated to the status of a national deity. Then, just as suddenly, it was all torn down. Vladimir converted, and his first act as a Christian ruler was to have the idol of Perun bound to a horse's tail, dragged through the city, beaten with sticks, and cast into the Dnieper River. The systematic dismantling was so complete that to this day, archaeologists have not been able to pinpoint the exact location of this sacred hill. So how do we find a god who has been so thoroughly scrubbed from history? The search for Perun has become a masterclass in comparative mythology and linguistic detective work. Scholars look to the structures of other Indo-European pantheons, comparing the known stories of Zeus and Thor to guess at the lost epics of Perun. They analyze the surviving folk tales about mysterious, unnamed giants and thunderers, searching for a core that might be a faded memory of the old god. Every place name is a clue, every folk rhyme a potential cipher. The story of Perun is ultimately a story of resilience, but not of the god himself. It is the resilience of his echo. His name refused to die, clinging to the land itself, whispered in the rituals of people who no longer knew why they performed them. His lost kingdom is a reminder that some gods are so deeply woven into a culture that even their absence becomes a powerful, haunting story. Darkness fell over the high plain of heaven, a shadow cast not by night but by divine despair. The sun goddess Amaterasu, in a fit of grief and rage, had sealed herself inside the heavenly rock cave after witnessing the brutal transgressions of her brother Susanoo. He had defiled her sacred weaving halls, hurling a flayed heavenly horse through the roof, an act so violent it caused one of her maidens to die of fright. For Amaterasu, the keeper of light and order, this chaos was unbearable. Her retreat plunged not just the celestial realm, but the entire world below into an endless, frigid night. Crops failed, spirits dwindled, and the voices of countless deities cried out in the gloom. How do you convince a goddess to bring back the sun when she believes the world is no longer worthy of its light? The other gods did not respond with solemn prayers, but with a strategy of calculated chaos. They gathered outside the cave's entrance and began a celebration so raucous and bizarre it defied all divine decorum. A powerful goddess named Aim no Usium overturned a tub and began a stomping, ecstatic dance, tearing off her clothes in a state of wild frenzy. The sight was so unexpectedly hilarious that the assembled 800 myriad gods roared with laughter, shaking the very firmament. This was the key. The gods understood that profound sorrow could not be countered with simple pleas, but only with an even more powerful, life-affirming joy. From within the cave, Amaterasu heard the uproarious celebration and could not contain her curiosity. Why were the gods so happy in her absence? Peering through a crack in the entrance, she saw her own brilliant reflection in a magnificent mirror the gods had hung from a nearby tree. She saw a being of immense light and power, and for a moment she did not recognize herself, drawn closer to this dazzling stranger. In that instant of captivated confusion, a strong god reached out and pulled her from the cave, and the light was restored to the world. But this myth is far more than a divine comedy. Its mystery lies in the layers of symbolism woven into every action. Was this an ancient explanation for a solar eclipse, a story created to make sense of the sun's terrifying disappearance? Or is it a profound allegory for the seasonal cycle, the sun's retreat in winter and its glorious return in spring? The psychological truth runs even deeper. It speaks to the universal human experience of retreat, of withdrawing our own inner light during times of pain or trauma. The myth suggests that the path out of that darkness is not always a quiet one, but often requires the disruptive, joyful energy of community and the shocking confrontation with our own hidden radiance. This is where the mirror's role becomes eternally significant. That same sacred mirror, Yota no Kagami, was later given to Amaterasu's grandson, Ninigi, when he descended to rule the earth. It became one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, the sacred treasures of the emperor. The mirror was not merely a tool of trickery, it was a profound spiritual artifact. It represented the very spirit of Amaterasu herself, a reminder that true insight comes from looking inward and recognizing the divine capacity within. The emperor, by possessing this mirror, was not just a political ruler but a custodian of this reflective wisdom, charged with maintaining the cosmic order that his ancestors had once restored. The cave's entrance was then sealed with a Shaimnawa, a sacred rope, ensuring the sun would never again abandon the world. Yet the story leaves us with a haunting reflection. What does it mean that the sun, the source of all life, had to be deceived into returning? And what does it say about our own nature that we sometimes need to be startled by our own brilliance to remember the light we carry inside? While Amaterasu's return brought light back to the world, a different kind of maternal power stirred in the mountains of Anatolia, one that Rome could not tame. The great mother Cybele arrived in the city with a prophecy, a demand for her sacred black stone to be brought from Phrygia to save the state from catastrophe during the Second Punic War. The Romans, ever pragmatic, welcomed her, but they were utterly unprepared for the goddess they received. Cybele was not a serene, domestic figure. She was the mother of the wild, a deity of untamed mountains, caverns, and ferocious beasts, whose worship was a thunderous, ecstatic affair. Her priests, the Galli, were not ordinary clergymen. In a state of divine frenzy, they would perform a ritual act that horrified and fascinated Roman society, a voluntary self-castration that mirrored the fate of her beloved consort, Deities. This was the ultimate rejection of Roman masculine order, a complete surrender to the goddess' wild nature. The Roman state, having officially adopted her, was now caught in a paradox. They needed her power, but they feared the chaotic devotion she inspired. A law was even passed forbidding Roman citizens from becoming her priests, a desperate attempt to contain the very foreign energy they had invited in. So why did such a seemingly destabilizing cult find a permanent home in the heart of the empire? The mystery of Cybele is her undeniable magnetic power. She represented a raw, elemental force of life, death, and rebirth that the orderly Roman pantheon lacked. In a world of structured rituals and political gods, she offered her followers a direct, shattering, and transformative encounter with the divine. Her secret was not her foreignness, but the profound human need she answered, a need for ecstatic release and a connection to the wild heart of creation that even the most powerful empire could not suppress. Far from the drumming and cries of Cybele's rites, a quieter, more pervasive mystery unfolds across the northwestern provinces of the Roman Empire. Here, from the misty lowlands of Britannia to the river valleys of Germania, we find the Matres or the Matrony. They are not one goddess, but a triad, almost always depicted as three seated women, dignified and calm. One might hold a basket of fruit in her lap, another a loaf of bread, while a third could cradle an infant. They are surrounded by the symbols of abundance, cornucopias and offerings, a vision of serene maternal provision. Thousands upon thousands of stone altars were raised to them by soldiers, merchants, and ordinary families, their inscriptions simple dedications to the mothers. Yet this incredible popularity is the core of their enigma. Who were these three women? They have no grand myths, no epic poems detailing their births or adventures. Their specific names are lost, their individual personalities blurred into a collective identity of nurture. Were they ancestral spirits watching over specific clans or bloodlines? Perhaps they were genius loci, the protective spirits of the land itself, ensuring the fertility of fields and the health of the community. Or could they represent a triple aspect of a single great goddess, embodying the phases of life as maiden, mother, and crone? The silence is deafening. The Romans, in their typical fashion of interpretatio romana, tried to equate them with their own goddesses like the Parcae or the Fates, but the matters never quite fit. Their power was more immediate, more personal. A soldier far from home would dedicate an altar not to ask for victory in battle, but for the health of his family, for a good harvest back on his farm, for the simple, profound blessings of daily life. The mystery of the matters is not one of dramatic rituals, but of silent, steadfast presence. They were the divine embodiment of home, a spiritual anchor for people living on the edges of an immense empire. We are left with their stone faces, a countless army of anonymous benefactresses whose true stories were so deeply woven into the fabric of everyday life that they never needed to be written down. They were simply lived. A single concept, a cosmic battle between truth and falsehood, became the engine for an empire. This was the world of Zoroastrianism, centered on the supreme god Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Wisdom. His divine struggle was not against a rival god, but against an abstract force of chaos and deceit known as the lie or drudge. The cosmic order, the underlying truth of the universe, was called Asher. For the Persian Achaemenid kings, this was not just theology, it was a direct mandate for earthly rule. King Darius the Great, who seized power amid rebellion and chaos, framed his entire reign as a holy war against drudge. His enemies were not merely political rivals, they were agents of falsehood, rebels who had embraced the lie and thrown the empire into disorder. His victory, therefore, was not just a military success, but a restoration of divine truth. The mystery carved into the cliff face at Behistun is how we interpret this claim. Was it cynical propaganda, a convenient way to paint all opposition as evil? Or was it a genuine religious conviction that guided state policy? The Behistun inscription, towering over the ancient road, tells Darius's story in 3 languages. He stands in relief, larger than life, under the symbol of the winged disc of Ahura Mazda, receiving the god's blessing. His foot rests on the chest of a defeated rebel, a visual declaration that he is the god's instrument crushing the lie. The text meticulously lists the kings he overthrew, each one branded as a liar who had deceived the people. This was public relations on an epic scale, a permanent billboard asserting that Darius's authority came directly from heaven to enforce cosmic order. But the philosophy may run deeper than mere justification. The palace reliefs at Persepolis show a different side of this divine mandate. They depict a vast, orderly empire where representatives from every nation bring tribute in a peaceful, harmonious procession. This was the visual embodiment of Ashar, a world brought to peace and truth under the king's benevolent rule. The king's role was to be a shepherd, protecting his flock from the wolves of chaos and falsehood. This suggests a sophisticated concept of kingship where the ruler's primary duty was to be a conduit for divine justice and truth, not just a wielder of raw power. So where does the propaganda end and the sincere belief begin? The line is impossibly thin. A king who truly believes he is fighting a holy war against falsehood can justify almost any action, yet that same belief can also compel him to rule with justice and build an infrastructure of fairness across his domains. The enigma of Ahura Mazda's mandate is that it contains both possibilities simultaneously. It provided a powerful, unifying ideology that held a vast, multicultural empire together, giving Persians, Egyptians, Babylonians, and Greeks a shared idea of a just and orderly world. The concept of the lie was a flexible enemy, one that could be internal, like corruption in his own administration, or external, like an invading army. This divine battle against falsehood became the spiritual backbone of an empire, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon a king can possess is not an army but an idea. High in the thin air of the Peruvian Andes, a god waits in absolute darkness. The Chavan de Huanta temple complex is a marvel of ancient engineering, a maze of underground passages and chambers built over 2,500 years ago. At its heart, buried deep within a cruciform gallery, stands the Lanzon, a 15-foot tall shaft of carved granite that pierces from the floor to the ceiling. This is the staff god, the central enigma of a civilization that predates the Inca by millennia. His form is a complex fusion of the natural world, with the snarling face of a jaguar, the curling body of a serpent, and a human-like posture. Most strikingly, he grips two ornate staffs, symbols of authority that give him his modern name. But what power did this composite being hold? The mystery begins with his identity. Was he a creator god, a divine ruler overseeing the birth of the world? Or was he a master of shapes, a shamanic transformer who could move between the realms of animal, human, and spirit? His jaguar features connect him to the power and danger of the jungle, while the serpents might symbolize the underground waters and the earth itself. He could be a single, all-encompassing deity or a portal to the entire spirit world. The true answer, however, may not lie in the carving itself, but in the experience of encountering it. The journey to the Lanzon was a carefully orchestrated ritual. Initiates would be led through narrow, twisting stone corridors, a disorienting labyrinth designed to separate them from the ordinary world. As they navigated this sacred maze, the temple itself seemed to come alive. The Chavan engineers were masters of hydraulics and acoustics. They built intricate water channels that, when flowing, would create a thunderous roaring sound throughout the complex, a noise like a mighty beast growling from the very stones. In certain chambers, these sounds would be amplified, creating echoes and vibrations that felt both internal and external. Imagine being a pilgrim, your senses already heightened by the darkness and the thin mountain air. You hear a deep, resonant booming that seems to come from everywhere at once. The walls vibrate. Then you are finally led into the cramped gallery where the Lanzon stands, and perhaps a priest would speak, their voice magnified and distorted by the temple's perfect acoustics, seeming to emanate from the stone god himself. This was not merely decoration, it was ancient divine special effects, a multi-sensory theater designed to produce awe and belief. The god did not just represent power, he was experienced as a living, speaking, breathing force. The staffs he holds may not be simple symbols of rule, but perhaps literal conduits, tools for channeling the very energies that the temple manipulated. The mystery of the staff god is therefore a dual one. We must ask not only who he was, but how he was brought to life. Were the visions and voices that initiates reported the result of genuine spiritual contact, or were they the brilliant psychological manipulations of the Chavan priesthood, using water and sound to make stone speak? The line is beautifully blurred. This technological mastery suggests a sophisticated understanding of human perception, proving that the path to the divine could be engineered as well as prayed for. The Lanzon remains in its dark chamber, a silent monument to a civilization that knew the power of a well-staged miracle. The world was born from the body of a slain mother. Before heaven and earth had found their names, there was only Tiamat, the shimmering, saltwater abyss, and her consort Apsu, the sweet, fresh waters. Together, they were the primordial parents, the silent, swirling chaos from which the first generations of gods were born. But this divine progeny grew loud and disruptive, and Apsu, yearning for the old silence, plotted to destroy them. In his treachery, he was himself destroyed by the clever god E. This act shattered the primordial peace and planted a seed of unimaginable vengeance in Tiamat's heart. Grieving and enraged, the mother of all transformed. She was no longer just the nurturing sea. She became a monstrous dragon of chaos, birthing an army of terrifying creatures to avenge her lost mate. She created serpents with fangs that dripped venom, dragons cloaked in a terrifying radiance, a giant scorpion man, and a furious hound, all led by her new husband, the god Kingu, to whom she gave the Tablet of Destinies, the very power to command the cosmos. The old gods were terrified, unable to face the mother who had become a monster. From their desperation, a champion was born, Marduk, the god of Babylon. He agreed to confront Tiamat, but on one condition, that the gods grant him absolute and unchallenged kingship over all of them. Desperate, they agreed. The ensuing battle was the ultimate conflict between order and chaos. Marduk, armed with his invincible weapons, rode his storm chariot into the fray. He confronted the roaring Tiamat, and with a powerful net he ensnared her. As she opened her jaws to consume him, he forced the evil winds inside her, inflating her body until she was helpless. Then he let fly a single arrow that tore through her swollen belly, splitting her heart and extinguishing her life. But the death of the dragon was only the beginning of the story. What does a creator god do with the corpse of a primordial goddess? Marduk set to work with the grim efficiency of a cosmic architect. He stood upon Tiamat's vast body and sliced it in two like a cleaved shellfish. With one half of her corpse, he arched the heavens, creating the firmament to hold back the upper waters. With the other half, he forged the earth below, pinning it down with mountains that he crafted from her breasts. From her eyes, he caused the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to flow. He set the moon and stars in the sky to mark the days and seasons. The body of the vanquished enemy became the very fabric of the ordered universe. This is the profound mystery at the heart of the Enuma Elish. Is this simply a myth of creation from destruction, a universal theme of life springing from a necessary death? Or is it a brilliant piece of political propaganda carved into clay to legitimize Babylon's sudden rise to power? In this reading, Marduk's victory over the older, Sumerian-influenced Tiamat represents Babylon's military and cultural triumph over the ancient city-states of Mesopotamia. His promotion to king of the gods mirrors the historical ascent of Babylon as the new imperial capital. The myth provided a divine mandate for a political reality. There is a third, more haunting possibility. Could this epic be a distant, fragmented memory of a real, prehistoric cataclysm? Some scholars have suggested it encodes a collective trauma of a massive flood or a cosmic impact, a time when the very world seemed to be torn apart and remade. The chaotic, watery Tiamat could be a personification of that terrifying deluge, which a culture hero figure, embodied by Marduk, was believed to have subdued and structured into the world they knew. The true enigma of Tiamat is her impossible duality. She is the mother of all, the source of life, and yet she becomes the monster that must be destroyed for life to continue in an orderly fashion. She is both the nurturing sea and the chaotic flood. Her story blurs every line we try to draw, forcing us to ask if the very ground beneath our feet, the sky above our heads, is built upon the corpse of a goddess we were forced to kill. Our ordered world, it seems, is forever haunted by the ghost of the chaotic mother from whose body it was made. The hunter does not beg the creator for his meal, but the keeper of the herd. Across continents and millennia, a singular figure emerges from the wilderness, a spiritual custodian known as the Lord of the Animals. He is the master of the game, the one who holds the keys to the herds of deer, the packs of wolves, and the flights of birds. In the frozen forests of Siberia, he is the Bear Lord, a shamanic spirit who must be honored with elaborate rituals after a kill. In the myths of ancient Greece, the goddess Artemis Potnia Theron, the mistress of the animals, holds a stag and a lion in her powerful grasp. Deep in the Amazon, indigenous hunters speak of a spirit who owns the peccary and the tapir, a being who must be respectfully addressed before the hunt can begin. This is not a creator deity, but a divine game warden, the ultimate protector of the wild. Why would cultures with no possible contact, separated by oceans and ages, dream up the same divine bureaucrat? The answer may be buried in our deepest past. Anthropologists propose that this concept is a ghost from the Paleolithic, a survival from the world of hunter-gatherers. For our ancient ancestors, survival was a delicate negotiation with the natural world. You could not simply take, you had to ask. The Lord of the Animals represents that primordial contract. The rules were simple but sacred. A hunter must show respect, use every part of the animal, and perform the correct rituals of thanks. In return, the Lord would allow more animals to be sent, ensuring the cycle of life continued. This was not worship born of fear, but of profound ecological understanding, an early recognition of sustainability. The shaman was the key to this contract. He was the intermediary, the one who could journey in a trance to the spirit world and negotiate directly with this lord. He would ask for the release of game, and he would offer the respect and apologies of the people. This shamanic thread connects the Siberian rituals to the Greek tales of shapeshifters and the Amazonian vision quests. The Lord of the Animals is not a distant king, but a manager you can meet with if you know the way. The true enigma is the uniformity of this figure. How could the same idea appear so vividly in unconnected cultures? This points to something deeper than shared history, something archetypal in the human mind. It suggests that when humanity lived close to the hunt, we universally arrived at the same spiritual conclusion, that the world is not a resource to be plundered, but a relationship to be honored. The Lord of the Animals is the personification of that sacred bargain, a reminder that our ancestors understood a truth we are only now rediscovering, that we are part of a balance, and every time we take a life to sustain our own, we owe a debt to the keeper of the wild. A plowed field suddenly gave birth to a god. In the rich soil of Etruria, as a farmer worked his land, a small, childlike figure sprang from a freshly turned furrow. This was Tages, and though he appeared as a boy, his face was ancient, and his eyes held the wisdom of ages. Before the astonished farmer could even speak, this being from the earth began to utter divine knowledge, teaching the gathered Etruscan priests the intricate and secret art of haruspicy. This was the foundation of the Etrusca disciplina, a sacred body of doctrine that would define a civilization. The sudden appearance of Tages presents an immediate mystery. Was he a minor deity, a demon, or perhaps a cultural hero whose legend was etched into the very landscape? His origin from the plowed earth is deeply significant, suggesting a wisdom that was not celestial but chthonic, rising directly from the soil itself. This was a knowledge rooted in the land, a system of divination that sought to read the will of the gods in the most visceral way imaginable. Haruspicy was not for the faint of heart. It required the ritual sacrifice of an animal, often a sheep, after which the specially trained priest, the haruspex, would meticulously examine its entrails. The liver was the most important organ, seen as a microcosm of the universe itself. They believed it was a mirror reflecting the gods' perfect order, or a map that, if correctly interpreted, could reveal coming disasters, military victories, or divine displeasure. The Etruscans had created detailed bronze models of livers divided into specific regions, each section corresponding to a different deity in their pantheon. A spot, a discoloration, or an unusual lobe shape was a message, a divine text written in flesh and blood. To the Romans, who would later adopt this practice, the entire ritual was both essential and utterly alien. The Etruscan disciplina was a complete science of divination, governing not just entrails but also the interpretation of lightning strikes and the flight patterns of birds. It was a way of managing the relationship between humanity and the gods, a constant, anxious dialogue with the unpredictable divine. Yet for all its complexity, the core of this belief system remains locked away from us. The Etruscan language, while we can read its letters, is still only partially understood, its deeper meanings lost. We have their tombs, their art, and their artifacts, but the living voice of their religion is silent. The mystery of Tages is therefore the mystery of an entire people. Did his teachings represent a unique, indigenous revelation, a true wisdom sprung from Italian soil? Or was the legend a later creation, a story designed to give divine authority to a priestly class and their arcane knowledge? The child who rose from the earth only to vanish back into legend, left behind a system that would shape Roman religion for centuries, yet his own true nature is a secret the Etruscan soil has never relinquished. A river can vanish from the land, yet flow more powerfully than ever through the human mind. This is the enduring mystery of the goddess Saraswati. Today, she is venerated as the embodiment of pure knowledge, the patroness of speech, music, and all flowing arts, often depicted as a serene woman in white playing the veena. But her origins are rooted not in the ether, but in the earth, in the memory of a colossal river celebrated in the Rigveda as the greatest of all, a mighty, roaring mother who brought life to a civilization. The enigma is that this dominant physical river, the Saraswati, is now gone. Geological surveys and satellite imagery have traced the ghost of a massive river system, a channel of paleo riverbeds buried under the sands of the Thar Desert, confirming the Vedic hymns were describing a real geographical giant. This river began to fail around 4,000 years ago, its waters stolen by tectonic shifts and climatic changes, until it finally disappeared from the surface around 2000 BC. So how does a culture respond when its most vital source of life simply dries up? The answer is one of the most profound acts of spiritual alchemy in history. The physical loss of the river did not erase it from memory. Instead, it catalyzed a breathtaking transformation. The Saraswati River was internalized. Its waters, which once irrigated fields, became a metaphor for the stream of consciousness. Its fertile banks became the landscape of the mind where knowledge could grow. The goddess Saraswati shed her identity as a purely geographical force and evolved into the deity of the flowing word, the river of wisdom that nourishes the soul. This was not a forgetting, but a sublime reimagining. The river did not die, it went underground, resurfacing in the realm of spirit. Her story becomes a powerful lesson in how human beings process profound loss. When the tangible world fails, we often rescue its essence by giving it a new, indestructible home in our mythology. The Saraswati's disappearance forced a shift from a dependence on external, physical sustenance to a pursuit of internal, intellectual sustenance. The river of water became the river of Veda, the eternal stream of sacred knowledge that never runs dry. This is why she is shown holding a book and a mala, representing eternal learning, and why she is associated with the white color of purity and the swan, a bird that mythically possesses the power to separate milk from water, a symbol for the discernment between truth and illusion. The lost river became the foundation for an entire philosophy of inner enlightenment. What does it mean that our greatest symbol of knowledge was born from a geographical catastrophe? It suggests that the most enduring truths are often forged in the fires of loss, and that the human spirit has a remarkable capacity to turn absence into a different kind of presence, ensuring that what is lost to the earth is never truly lost to us. A god can die and the world can wither with him. This was the terrifying reality for the Canaanites, whose entire existence depended on the brutal, cyclical drama of the storm god Baal-Hadad. Preserved on ancient clay tablets from the city of Ugarit, his story is not one of serene omnipotence, but of fierce struggle, temporary defeat, and bloody resurrection. It begins with a challenge to his authority from the sea god Yam, a chaotic force of primordial waters. The divine council, cowed by Yam's power, even agrees to hand Baal over to him. But Baal will not submit. With two magical clubs fashioned by the craftsman god Kothar Wakoses, he confronts the sea. The first club strikes Yam but only drives him back. The second, named the Driver, strikes with such force that it defeats the sea god, establishing Baal's kingship over the ordered world. Yet victory only brings a new struggle. A king must have a palace. Baal petitions El, the aged high god, for permission to build a house worthy of his station. After initial reluctance and with the fierce advocacy of his sister consort Anat, Baal receives his wish. His palace is constructed, a symbol of his established rule over the cosmos. But this hard-won order is immediately threatened by a far more final adversary, the god Mot, whose name means death. Mot, a divine force of sterility and drought, demands that Baal, the god of life-giving rain, bow down to him and journey to the underworld. In a shocking turn, Baal consents. He is consumed by the earth, descending into the gullet of Mot, and with his disappearance, all fertility ceases. The rains stop and a devastating 7-year drought grips the world. The high god El mourns, descending from his throne to sit in the dirt, pouring ashes on his head in a profound display of grief. But Anat will not accept this loss. Her grief is not passive but violently active. She searches the earth for her brother, and when she finds Mot, she does not negotiate. She seizes the god of death. She splits him with a sword, she winnows him like grain, she burns him in a fire, she grinds him between millstones, and she scatters his remains over the fields. This visceral, gruesome dismemberment of death itself creates the conditions for life to return. With Mot temporarily vanquished, Baal is restored to the throne, and the life-giving rains begin again. The cycle is complete, but it is never ending. Each year, the struggle repeats. The mystery of this story lies in its raw, seasonal logic. It is a divine explanation for the brutal reality of the Levant's climate, where the summer drought feels like the death of the world, and the autumn rains are a miraculous resurrection. But its echoes are far louder than that. This powerful narrative of a god who dies and rises, who brings fertility through his struggle with a chthonic enemy, reverberated throughout the ancient Near East. The mystery that has captivated scholars for a century is whether this Canaanite cycle directly influenced the later dying and rising god motifs found in the Hellenistic world, and most profoundly within early Christian theology. The parallels are hauntingly familiar. Was Baal-Hadad a theological precursor, a prototype for a story that would one day be told in a different key? The Ugaritic texts offer no simple answer, only the powerful, timeless image of a god whose life was a battle, and whose death was a necessary prelude to the world's rebirth. Two of the most legendary voices of the ancient world belonged to women who channeled the divine. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the Pythia of Delphi presided over the most important oracle in Greece. Her prophecies shaped wars, founded colonies, and decided the fates of kings. The process was as mysterious as the pronouncements themselves. On specific days, after ritual purification, she would descend into the inner sanctum of Apollo's temple, a chamber known as the Aditon. There, she would seat herself on a tripod cauldron positioned over a deep fissure in the rock. As she inhaled strange, sweet-smelling vapors rising from this chasm, she would fall into a divine frenzy, her body convulsing, her voice distorted. Priests would then translate her ecstatic utterances into the famously ambiguous hexameter verses that seekers carried home. For centuries, this was accepted as the direct voice of the god Apollo. Modern geology, however, offers a compelling scientific explanation. Excavations at the site have uncovered two fault lines crossing directly beneath the temple, which could have released ethylene, a gas known to induce trance-like states and euphoria. Was the Pythia's sacred frenzy a chemically altered state? The mystery deepens when we consider her answers. When King Croesus of Lydia asked if he should wage war on the Persians, the oracle told him that if he attacked, he would destroy a great empire. He did, and he did destroy a great empire, his own. This inherent ambiguity was the oracle's genius and its danger, a divine language that could never be pinned down, ensuring its authority remained absolute even when its predictions failed. Far to the west, in a dark cave near the Italian city of Cumae, another ancient prophetess held court. This was the Sibyl, a figure of terrifying longevity. She was not a succession of priestesses like the Pythia, but a single, incredibly old woman. It was said she had been granted centuries of life by Apollo, but she failed to ask for perpetual youth, and so she slowly withered away, her voice growing faint, her body shrinking until she was kept in a jar, waiting for death. Her most famous client was the Trojan hero Aeneas, whom she guided through the terrifying depths of the underworld to meet the ghost of his father. But her greater legacy and its loss would haunt Rome for centuries. According to legend, the Sibyl offered 9 books of prophecies to the last Roman king, Tarquin the Proud. He refused her initial price, so she burned 3 of the books and offered the remaining 6 for the same sum. He refused again, and she burned 3 more. Alarmed, he finally bought the last 3 books for the original, exorbitant price. These became the Sibylline books, Rome's most sacred and secret texts. They were not used to predict the future, but were consulted only in moments of extreme crisis, such as plagues or military disasters, to prescribe specific rituals to appease the gods. The great mystery is the content of those 6 lost books. What divine knowledge, what warnings about the fall of empires, what secrets of fate went up in those 2 fires? The surviving books were themselves destroyed in a fire centuries later, leaving the Romans and us with only the ghost of a question, the haunting idea that the gods had offered a complete guide to destiny, and humanity, through hesitation and bargaining, had allowed most of it to turn to ash. A landscape can be born from the movement of a divine body. Across the vast and ancient continent of Australia, the rainbow serpent slumbers within the very earth, its body the rolling hills, its path the winding riverbeds. This is not a myth from a forgotten age, but a living story, the foundational narrative of the Aboriginal Dreamtime. The rainbow serpent is the ultimate creator being, a force that awoke during the dreaming and shaped the world from a featureless plane. As it traveled, its massive body carved out the courses of rivers and gouged deep waterholes. Where it rested, it left the curves of valleys and the bulk of mountains. This being is not merely a character in a story, it is the physical land itself, a testament to a spirituality where the earth is alive with sacred meaning. The rainbow serpent embodies a profound duality. It is the source of all life-giving water, the bringer of rain that replenishes the land and ensures fertility for both plants and people. Yet it is also a destructive power, a creature of immense strength that can cause terrible floods if its laws are broken or its sacred sites are disrespected. It is both the giver of life and the enforcer of the law, a moral compass woven directly into the geography. The deepest mystery of the rainbow serpent is not its power, but its staggering longevity. In a rock shelter in Arnhem Land, a painting of this being has been dated to be at least 6,000 years old. That means this story, this specific spiritual concept, has been told and retold, painted and repainted for over 6,000 years. This makes the rainbow serpent one of the oldest continuous religious beliefs in the entire world. A narrative thread connecting modern Aboriginal people directly to their ancestors who lived at the dawn of human civilization. How does a story survive for so long? The answer lies in its inseparable link to the land and identity. The myth of the rainbow serpent is not a separate theology, it is an ecological and social map. It teaches the locations of permanent water sources, crucial for survival in a harsh climate. It encodes the rules for sharing resources and the consequences of greed. It defines the relationships between different clans and their responsibilities to care for their country. This is a belief system that fuses mythology, ecology, and law into a single, cohesive whole. To know the story of the rainbow serpent is to know how to live sustainably on the land, to understand your place within a community, and to see the divine in the curve of a river or the shade of a rock overhang. Its enduring presence challenges our modern separation of the sacred from the everyday, reminding us that the oldest stories are often the ones that tell us not just how the world was made, but how we are meant to live within it. A severed head could whisper the future from a battlefield stake. Across the Celtic world, from the misty highlands of Scotland to the forests of Gaul, the human head was not a trophy of war, but a vessel of ultimate power. They believed the soul, a person's life force and wisdom, resided within the skull. To capture an enemy's head was to capture their spirit, to hold their essence captive and force it to serve you. These heads were not hidden away, they were proudly displayed at the entrances to homes and forts, set on poles as guardians and oracles. It was said these grim sentinels could still speak, their lips moving in the wind to utter prophecies and warnings. This was the cult of the head, a spiritual practice that saw the line between life and death as porous, and the human body as a container for a power that did not simply vanish when the heart stopped beating. Into this world of potent duality steps Sucellos, a god whose name means the good striker. He appears in statues across the Roman province of Gaul, a sturdy, bearded father figure. In one hand, he holds a large pot or sometimes a barrel brimming with grain or coin, a clear symbol of provision and abundance. He is a god of the community, a protector of the home and the harvest. But in his other hand, he wields an enormous long-handled mallet, a tool of immense and unsettling force. The mystery of Sucellos swings on the purpose of that mallet. Was it the weapon of a smiter, a divine enforcer who could strike down enemies or punish oath-breakers with a single, thunderous blow? Could it have been a more practical tool, used by this divine craftsman to drive the boundary stakes of a sacred grove or a village, physically marking the line between the civilized world and the wild? The most haunting possibility connects the mallet directly to the cult of the head. In a belief system where the soul was contained within the skull, what instrument could be more ritually significant than one capable of a swift, decisive strike? The mallet might not have been for destruction, but for release, a tool to free the soul from its bony prison in a controlled, sacred context. This transforms Sucellos from a simple god of provision into a figure of profound duality. He is the life-giver with his pot of plenty and the potential life-taker with his powerful mallet. He represents the community's safety, but also the chilling, raw power that safety was built upon. His mallet embodies the Celtic understanding that creation and destruction are two sides of the same coin, that the god who blesses the harvest might also be the one who wields the instrument of sacred force. He is the protector who understands that to guard life, one must sometimes stand in the presence of death, holding the very tool that could cross that ultimate threshold. Our journey through the forgotten realms of ancient divinity reveals a tapestry of breathtaking complexity. We have witnessed gods who vanished without a trace, like Keahuil, and monsters like Pazuzu, who were worshipped as protectors. We have seen oracles who crowned mortals with divine authority and creators like Marduk, who forged our world from the corpse of a primordial mother. These are not simple tales of superhuman beings, but profound expressions of the human experience itself. They are the crystallized hopes, fears, and intellectual triumphs of civilizations trying to make sense of a chaotic universe, to find order in the storm, and to grasp their own place within a cosmos alive with invisible power. Each enigmatic story is a keyhole through which we can peer into the minds of our ancestors, seeing their struggles with power, their terror of the unknown, and their desperate, beautiful attempts to find meaning. So we leave you with one final question to ponder. Which of these enigmatic deities left you with the most questions? Was it the silent lord of the wild, Cernunnos, or the tragic, dismembered child, Dionysus Zagreus? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know which mysteries you would unravel next. Subscribe for more journeys into the unknown, and as always, keep the flame of curiosity burning bright.